Welcome to the SCV's Voice of Business, a Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce podcast. It is nice to be with you. I am your host, Corey Nathan. I am so glad to be with my co-host and co-collaborator and partner in crime, Joshua Maddux. Joshua, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Excited to be kicking things off this morning.
Yeah, so cool to be with you as well. And this is where we talk about business in the SCV. We really talk about business all over the country, but a lot of the business owners and business leaders and other community leaders we'll be speaking with will be from right here in our hometown, the Santa Clarita Valley. Sometimes we don't just stick to business. We talk about leadership and management and life and anywhere the spirit takes us. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Tell a friend. Tell about Voices of Business SCV. Give us a good rating and leave a review too. Those reviews really do make a difference. All of it helps get the word out, so more people can participate in these conversations like the one we're having today with our friend, Selina Thomas. Selina Thomas, Selina Thomas is celebrating the 10-year anniversary of her successful company, 6 Degrees HR Consulting. Selina has a master's in HR and human resources and is a nationally certified human resources specialist. She works closely with many local companies, including my own. She works with employment attorneys and insurance brokers to assure the compliance and infrastructure of small businesses. She's often called upon as an expert in her industry and lends herself and her expertise to the Workforce Development Center at COC, the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce, which we love, and the Valley Industry Association. But today we are fortunate to have her on the Voices of Business. Selina, so good to be with you. How you doing?
I'm great. It's always great to catch up and see you. And thank you guys for having me on your show today.
Absolutely. So I figured a good way to start, maybe you knew that I was going to ask you about this. We got to talk about Dr. Thomas. Can you tell us about your dad and his influence on your life?
And so the timing is always like almost serendipitous. I just celebrated his birthday last Friday, March 22nd, and he's right here. He's always around me.
Yeah.
He was a huge influence. And actually, fun fact, he was 6 Degrees' first employee 10 years ago. He actually would vet my handbooks. He lived in Guatemala and was fluent in Spanish, so he would vet some of my Spanish handbooks and give me some feedback. He really served as a great consultant, and it was awesome to be able to put him on the payroll and have that reciprocity for all the years that he had, really poured into me as a person, as his daughter, and it stays with me today. I value all the wisdom, still hear it, and true trailblazer. He was an Air Forceman, went to the Air Force right out of high school, was in Manila, Philippines within 9 months, and saw my mom in a GI bar and was completely shook, if you will. And so he didn't know how to articulate, so he rode the bus for 6 months to learn how to speak to her so he could shoot his shot, and the rest is history, if you will. And so came back from the Air Force, became an air traffic controller. They all went on strike, if you remember that, in 1980.
Yeah.
And so he took the GI Bill and became an educator, and through my kind of formative years, evolved in education space, and ultimately was principal in high school and then retired as superintendent. So I think really I share his story often because the evolution of him as a person really was framework for me to see that, life is like that. You will evolve, and you take the good with the bad, and you always serve, and you find the things that feed your soul. And that's what I've done in my personal and professional career. And it makes, make it your own. And so, it's always nice to have a conversation about him. It brings him to life.
Last time we talked, you told me that one of your daughters just got into Gonzaga on a full ride. And
yes.
The way you talk about your daughter, it makes sense now hearing you talk about your dad and his influence on your life. It makes sense that there's you use words like serendipity and reciprocity, and you're continuing very much in that tradition, it seems like. Tell us a little bit more about your daughters and your impact on their lives.
Oh, thank you. And I hope that that's the case, right? We hope for that as parents. But yes, I had just gotten back from Spokane, Washington with Morgan, who's a senior at Saugus, and she is headed to Gonzaga, and she reminds me of the pronunciation often.
Gonzaga.
Gonzaga, exactly. And so I'm a Zag mom, and she is headed there on an academic. And if she chooses to play volleyball, she will. And what a great way to kind of start out in life, to recognize that you have the ability with all their gifts and talents to write your ticket. And they've done that. And so she's a senior, just finishing out her senior year at Saugus now. Mia is a sophomore at University of Portland, also Saugus alumni. And Madison, who is a chamber member now and a business owner, owns Maddie the Dog Maven, and very, very busy. She's incredible businesswoman already, and already graduated from college and working towards buying a house. So I'm super proud of them.
I have to ask, what is Maddie the Dog Maven? Is a dog groomer? What?
Dog sitter.
Dog sitter.
And will not just dogs, but she's an equestrian, so she also can care for horses and does so out of the canyon quite a bit. And so she will stay in your home. So her niche is that she does stay in your home. And there's a lot of people traveling this weekend. It's Easter weekend, and she's busy this entire weekend because people have, traveled to go see their families. And so it's great that she's local and can, get from one house to another fairly quickly. And so she's found a way to build a great book of business already. And she's 2 years in, a member of the chamber and VIA. So I'm proud that she knows the need to network and to immerse herself with other businesses and like-minded people.
Joshua, I don't know if you're thinking what I'm thinking, but I think we want to recruit her for something else too, right?
Imagine. Young new business owners in town are, really the future. And so I'm really proud to be able to see her kind of dive right in right after she got out of school.
Well, it's exciting for me to also see like local high school graduates who are then, creating a business here locally. My digital agency, like we've been in business, this is 16 years for us. And so part of it, like it feels like, oh yeah, I'm younger, but then at the same point, like, no, I filed an LLC like ages ago. And so the process now for like getting an EIN number is literally you go online, fill out a form, hit a button, and it spits out your EIN, where like before it was wait 30 to 60 days for the mail to come to get it. And, I hear news reports about like, starting a business nowadays is so much more difficult and so much more challenging, but we're still doing it. And people are, because there's so much more fulfillment in running your own business oftentimes and having those wins and being able to set your schedule and do the thing you really love, which is
Isn't that
exciting.
amazing? Your passion becomes your purpose, and then you're paid for it. And so I think she could see her affinity to animals and care of them. And it really kind of started out very organically. Like people knew that about her, and, hey, Maddie, could you watch my dog this weekend? And could you, and as she started to consider the direction she wanted to go in professionally, she's like, why wouldn't I just build a business around what I do very naturally? And it evolved into being able to do other things that feed her soul. So she's a great designer, and she has, things on Etsy. And so she gets to kind of not necessarily emulate kind of the pathway, but do it sooner. Like, some of us get kind of cooking this, stuck in a cookie cutter formula for what success looks like. But Albright Painting, I just did their training this morning, and I forgot this fun fact about Josh, but he started his painting company, Albright Painting, at 19. So Madison was in that window, and now look, Albright Painting is the painting company for HOAs, for our community and beyond. And so, I say the sooner you learn the things that feed your soul and make your passion your purpose, I say go for it. So all three of them have different things that appeal to them, and they took it and they ran with it, and they were kind of given a safe space to do that with, what I was doing. And so I'm so happy for them.
So I was curious what led you to 10 years ago set up your first office at a local Starbucks and start your company. Like what brought you to that point, personally and professionally?
Yeah, so we've chatted so many times about this, and I really love to share the fact that it evolved out of changing my life, changing my personal circumstances, changing the industry that I was previously in, which was social work. Saw that it wasn't suiting the kind of characteristics that I have naturally really was kind of sucking from me. And I had, again, seen my father evolve. And I always remembered him saying, never be afraid to change, right? Shift gears, whether it's, professionally or in situations, because if it's not working for you, you're really kind of just stifled in what you can bring to the table. And so I joined the chamber and I joined VIA and I started networking, didn't have a brick and mortar. And I saw such a need for small businesses, which is this community, right, is built on small businesses. So there wasn't a person in that lane at the level that I was, meaning, there's that sweet spot financially. And then, of course, if you go beyond a specialist or in-house, you're talking to an employment attorney that's $5.25 an hour, right? So small businesses didn't necessarily have the budget to do that, but I had a talent to be able to help frame infrastructure and compliance in companies. And then it grew. And I was really deliberate and intentional about, even in Starbucks, my name, which is 6 Degrees HR Consulting. And if you know the premise of 6 Degrees, that's a global concept. So I thought big even while I was small, even knowing that I had to kind of build. But now I have clients in Bordeaux. I have clients in Madrid, Spain that are US based companies, but have employees in those countries. And I get to travel there. Darn, tough job. I got to go to the Olympics this summer, but it's, really thinking big, even when you're small. And I think because I shared my story about someone that was willing to go at 19 to the Philippines, like I'm immersed in it. And now I have another generation of my girls immersed in thinking big, even when you're in a small town and you're in a small situation. And so I love that our business owners here, our family businesses, they are, whether they started with a service like La Cocina, one of my favorite clients, started with one restaurant on Seco and Copper Hill. And now they have, 3 and a taco kind of catering company. And it's generational now. So really planting a seed. And it's 30-year anniversary they just celebrated. And the dad's like, look, my kids were, at our taco truck early. They understood early the need to pour into the company and pour into the brand. And so it started really organically, to your question, and then it becomes purpose, and then a means to support, and not just your family but the community. So I'm really tied to, as you know, because you see me out in the same places that you're in, I'm really tied to paying that forward as well, and that's important.
Joshua, it occurs to me that you and Selina have a lot in common here, in that your businesses are about the businesses and the people of Santa Clarita. So, it's just, as Selina, you're kind of celebrating these other businesses that you've gotten to work with and these human beings that you've developed relationships with. Joshua, I know from, we've known each other and been on boards together. It seems to me that's what drives you a lot as well.
Yeah, it very much does. And Selina, you probably have the same element where you walk into a business and you sit down and you're like, so where are you guys at? Like, I'm like, for me, it's like, where are you at in the marketing space? Or, for you, where are you at, HR wise? And they're like, oh, well, we did this. And all of a sudden your heart sinks and you're like, oh, okay.
Yes.
Recently had a conversation with a company. They've had a few other marketing companies over the years. And I was like, when did you guys move? They're brick and mortar. And they're like, oh, we moved like 2.5 years ago. And I was like, cool. Probably should update your Google Maps listing. And they're like, oh, that's why so many people end up being late. I'm like, it took 2 years to figure that out.
And I love that point you made. It's like, when I introduce what I do, it's what you don't know that will get you in my space, right? And for you, it's what they don't know or consider in that lane that will either be missed opportunities, right? Or at the end of the day, it be just kind of dated, antiquated information. And we're always accelerating in our information right now. It's like almost too fast, right? With the advent of AI and all the things that our heads are still spinning about. But if you don't keep up, right, and especially in my lane, there's exposure and there's losses. And so I have a mindset about my approach as a practitioner is that I'm people centered, because the human is first in HR, the word human. And so I'm always going in, not just about the technical part, because I can do that with my eyes closed, right? I've made sure I've mastered those things, but not everybody can do the human part and the people centered part. And it's always going to be back to the culture, and culture creates community. And so it's all really tied to elements and attributes that I kind of have innately. And so it's for me every day a good day, because I get to see people in their spaces, what they do. I've got incredible clients that do various things and are in innovation or medicine or creating. I just came back from the Paint It Forward event where the whole entire team for All Bright Painting is painting an event called Pay It Forward. Every year they select a worthy community member and they paint their house. And this is like my 7th year doing it. And
So cool.
every year is a new
Love
thing.
that they do that.
Yeah.
That community, the culture extends into the community. Like, how amazing is that? This is all before people were required to kind of consider diversity, equity, inclusion, and all the buzzwords you hear now. They've done this for over 10 years.
So over the course of your business, it's been just business as usual. Not much has happened over the last 4 years or so, right?
No, exactly. It's been pretty quiet on this end.
No,
COVID. It was
I'm
huge in the trajectory of my company. Yes, you're right.
So 2020 was a big one, and I know that you helped a lot of businesses, not just help them through COVID, but in a post-COVID era. Can you talk a little bit about how you've been handling that yourself as a business owner and business leader, as well as how you've been helping your companies, your clients?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because it really came down to all of our existence. Certainly, if they fell, I would fall. So it was all of us. There was no playbook on this. This was uncharted territory. And even for seasoned practitioners like myself, who collaborates with other seasoned practitioners, we were all spinning. And so I think the help first was just saying that you have, and we're all disconnected at that point. This was not even an element we used in terms of Zoom, and so I had to. My outreach only could be in this way, and so every day I would do videos on whatever the current situation was. Whether it was, if you remember, it was essential workers. You had to have a list, and you found out if you were on it, or if your industry or company was on it, and then you had to develop operations around what the restrictions were. So in that way, developed kind of processes to be compliant with the public health part. And then as it progressed, just kind of updating people and just considering that we're so disconnected. You needed to have, and at least I felt this way, kind of a positive voice that was going to give you some hope for the next day and guidance at the same time. So I started doing daily videos. I kind of made myself essential because I wasn't on that list, but I didn't wait until someone said, "Hey, you're deemed essential." I was essential ultimately because certain industries that I was serving were, and they had to have processes that allowed them to work safely. And so that's how I helped during. And then post was really, the workforce shortages was probably the biggest post, separate from, the vaccination mandates. And that's kind of fallen away in a way that doesn't impact people. But the workforce shortages is still really resonant now. And that's why we're kind of really being collaborative and innovative about how people work. Hybrid is a new, all of us know that we can work remotely and we can be efficient about it. And so developing processes for the remote worker and the in-person worker, and both, and how employers really have to find a compromise of like, hey, they don't want to come back and you still need them. So things that you wouldn't have considered 5 years ago, you probably are going to need to consider extending to them. So just helping them understand this is really a new era in employment now. So
Right.
it's going to continue to evolve.
And I think so many companies that, companies that have been in existence for 100, 200 plus years that have been doing business as usual. I've got a buddy of mine who moved, relocated, and he got a job in October of 2019. And he's, his job previously had some remote ability. And he said, will there be any remote options? And they said, absolutely not. And within 6 months, he was a full remote employee. And by his 1 year anniversary of being at the company, they said, you are fully remote. You will not be back in the office, only for meetings.
And there's some compromise that they didn't want to do in the beginning, and now they have. And I can guarantee you, in that course of that year, they've had to develop some processes for accountability, the work, the camera, all of it. And so that's been part of kind of a new layer for. So let me explain. With my credentials, you have to have 80 CEUs a year to maintain the license, because so many things happen in mandates and laws that change and so on. Because of COVID, they added 20 more units that you needed to get just to keep up with that aspect of where we are with compliance and processes. So it has had to level up anyone that's a practitioner, and they consider that that's going to be the new standard in terms of CEUs, because of just the example you just gave. Like, you're really developing things that were never there before for employers. And then how does that affect them overall operationally? Are they going to exist this way moving forward? And that's what you've just found out. They will.
Yeah. I mean, my company, we had a home office type setup where I lived previously. And our team was sort of a separate, like, dedicated space still on the property. And our team typically came in came in 2 to 3 days a week. Now I'm literally like in a shed in my backyard type setup. And I've got enough space that I've got 2 or 3 people, I've got 2 desks over on the one side wall that, local team can, but some of our team now lives in Texas. Like, every single employee over the course of the first year-ish of COVID relocated. And some of it was literally just move across town, but some of it was, move further than that.
And that's tied to work-life balance. People discovered that they could do all of it. And part of why the workforce didn't come back is because they found a balance that they never had before, and they didn't want to give that up. If we've been struck with all these things and losses and change, so that was, if I were to really kind of give you a sampling of what it was like when people were like, I'm not coming back, that was always the sentiment. I have a routine now. I have my kids that I'm more present for, or I've started this other business and I'm pouring into things that I had always put off, because that COVID era forced us to kind of go inward, and things changed for people in their mindset about what they could do, what they could accomplish in that space or in that time, and other things in terms of their families and the things that they're passionate about.
That's something that I saw, as coming out of COVID, like, people got okay with not having a ton of things to do. And so it was like, historically, like, you would have, 5 different things on your calendar, throughout the week during the evenings or whatever. And now it's seeing people that are like, no, we'll just pick 2. Like, we're not going to do quite as much stuff. Like, it's okay to just have an evening at home and watch a movie and chill. Like, it is okay to just not go to that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You've described yourself as biracial, but specifically you often bring it up in the context of being able to relate to all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds and families. And I was wondering how you take your own experience, personal experience, as well as your expertise in HR, and help your clients adapt when they, to current conditions. Different companies have different priorities and different ways to look at things, but Are you able to help them ask the right questions and grapple with some tough conversations?
And you're exactly right. And thanks for mentioning that. That is a delicate dance that we have to manage in the HR space, especially with people that are working with their employees, and there's either discord or like social issues come into the workplace, right? And so for me, I really come from a place of being able to relate to a lot of people because of my life experiences and travels as a military child and having to be in areas that I wouldn't. Most people haven't experienced that kind of moving around. And when you're a child, you can maybe see it differently because most people want to just kind of grow up, have the same friends, and be, in the same town and have that connection. And so when my father was having to kind of explain why we travel and move, he framed it in a way like there's another opportunity to see another region of the country, and another type of person, and that is only going to enrich your life. So I do bring that into how I convey and communicate with employers and employees, because that disconnect is often because of lack of experience, a lack of knowledge. And so and because I am third party, they're almost too close to be able to see it. But on the outside looking in, with my life experience and, as you said, expertise, I can see it very clearly. So it becomes almost those things that I've had before and what I've availed myself to information wise becomes like an HR superpower, right? So I can see it more clearly, but I can also, because I've related to many people, adjust and meet them where they're at and help them develop the ability to meet people where they're at. So it is learned and shared in what I do. And it just creates, and I come from a place as a practitioner of educating people while I'm training them as to what and why I'm doing things. It's not just arbitrary. There's a real reason behind what I'm doing, and how I'm applying it is going to be done so with humanity. And so I think that's really what sets me apart as a company, as a practitioner, as a brand. But it is important, the more years of experience you have and the required training you have to have just really amplifies the experience for the employer and the employee. So I'm really happy to be able to be where I'm at, and have those things be signature to me.
Absolutely, and you've mentioned it a couple times, but the first word in your expertise is human. So connecting to people on a human level and always keeping that front and center is, I think, is one of your secrets to success. But Joshua, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I love talking through like secrets to business success, or another element of this is like what makes the sort of the lessons that you've learned sort of stand out to give you that edge. And sometimes those lessons are big business fumbles that,
Sure. Yeah.
so is there a secret to success that you can share?
I think humility is a secret, and the ability to realize that you're always growing. And so never feeling like you have all the answers and that you won't misinterpret legislation. And I navigate taking policies to another level because we have to interpret what legislation means and make a policy. I'll give you an example. There was like a time and attendance policy or mandate that came out about 5 years ago, and we have to then translate it and make it a policy for our company. And myself, and I always draw from power partners like John Schaffery, Brian Cagley. There's a lot of people that are go-tos here in town that people know. And so we collaborate in how we not only understand it, but how we educate the employer on it. And I remember one time I collaborated with someone and both of us had it completely wrong in terms of just how it's supposed to be applied. And, having to go back to the employer and rewind that and take it back and say, hey, this is really not the way that this policy should be applied. You have to have humility as their again, I'm your expert. You hired me, right? But the owner told me, he's like, I appreciate that not only that you caught it, but that you were humble enough to go, hey, time, we got to redo this, and we have to come back out with it. And so as an employer, he's like, that allowed me to say, if I make a mistake as an employer, I can be humble enough to tell my employees instead of saying, hey, the boss always has it right, or it's me, I said it, I'm at the top, too bad. So I think that requires in any situation humility. And so I'm always willing to be humble, and really I have a board in my garage. When you pull in, it says work hard, stay humble. And so I pull out with that and I pull in with that. So I kind of live by that.
Excuse me. I should have had myself on mute. I might keep that on the recording, actually.
Yeah, no worries. The bloopers are always part of my kind of signature too. I share those because at the end of the day, the bloopers I shared a lot during COVID because I've never been this person to be that, I'm a radio girl, right? So I had a client that didn't have social media, and I sent him the wrong reel. I sent him the blooper and not the information. And I was like, oh my God, I sent the blooper. And he wrote back, he goes, keep sending these. And we were in such a dark place. He's like, this made my day. And so then the bloopers were sent out to everyone because it says, look, I'm going to keep doing it until I get it right. And there's a humanity about that, right? And humility about, sharing the mess ups.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, now you get to turn the tables on us.
Yes.
Do you have any questions for me or Joshua? Joshua?
Yeah. And I think I love these mediums now, and I've seen how they've evolved in a way that reaches so many more people, reaches people that you may or may not ever meet. And so that's powerful. And to collaborate and do that, what is your hope for what you're doing right now? Why do you do it? And, of course, none of us, sometimes we do things and there's no monetary exchange. So what is the reciprocity for you?
Do you want me to go first, Joshua?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Go for it.
I love this medium. I love the podcast. From the very first podcast I ever figured out how to listen to, it was about, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer. And as soon as it was a Mark Maron podcast, he's a great interviewer. And I just really fell in love with how podcasting in particular had a way of inviting everyone to an intimate conversation among interesting, engaged people. And I have a background in producing theater and some independent film and stuff. And I immediately thought of this medium as a producer. What stories can we uniquely tell, or what conversations can we uniquely have in the podcast world? So I'm excited to have these conversations with my neighbors, with my colleagues, with people that I've known for years through the chamber and the SEV business group that Joshua and I are a part of. And to bring these stories to life. The other thing too is I'm very, as some folks know, I'm very plugged in socially and politically and theologically, religiously. And one of the unfortunate developments of the last, say, 25 years or so in our country is the almost extinction of the local paper. The Signal here in SCV is unique, but literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of local papers have essentially gone away. And that was such an important connecting tissue to keep the community together, to keep us knowing who won the football game last night at the high school game, knowing, having a way, a connected way, a common way of knowing what charity events is going on this weekend, or what's happening, with current events and local officials, local elected officials. So I think podcasting can very much pick up where local papers, in a lot of ways that local papers had previously been serving us. It's taking nothing away from the Signal. The Signal does a great job, and KHDS does a great job. But when I grew up, we had the Star Ledger and the Asbury Park Press and the Tribune, and we had a number of bustling local ways to connect with current events. So I'm really excited about about this being a place to get to know our neighbors, get to know our business leaders, get to know our elected officials, get to know each other, and allow that lifeblood of the community to continue to circulate.
I feel the passion in that answer, and I love your shows. Your interview was one of my favorite, and I still, there's a natural ability that you have, right? It's kind of untrained, but there's that talent that allows people to, like you said, get connected, stay connected, and you can repeat it all the time and get good energy. So I love that too.
So I got to tell you something. I think I might have told you this before, but we've had some big people on that show. Even at that point, we were still in our first year on that politics show. And I had one interview that went south. Nationally known figure, like he has 1 million followers. This guy has 1 million followers on Twitter. I won't say who it is, but a very famous person. If I said his name, everybody would know who. And but he turned out to be a real jerk in the aftermath. It was a one interview out of about 200 that I've done that he turned out to be a real jerk in the aftermath. But his, because of how famous he is, scored really high. So you came on about, I don't know, 2 months after he did. And within the first week, your numbers surpassed his. So
oh my God. That's
I was so glad.
Still am so pleasantly surprised by that. And I think there was a lot of, authenticity in the conversation. And so that was you drove that. And so it's one of my favorite conversations.
Thank you.
Well, I think that for me is part of why I love this platform as a whole. Like I picked up and sort of got into the podcasting space and ran a podcast for a bit.
Really good podcast, by the way.
During sort of the beginning-ish of COVID, because my 2020 goal was join the chamber. And, I was in a networking group at the times already. And it was my 2020 goal was join the chamber and go to more, local networking events. And we all know how that went.
Shut down. Exactly.
Just didn't work well.
Yes.
And so I was in some like digital agency mastermind stuff, and I was in some other groups digitally that, I'm sitting in Santa Clarita and there's people in Texas and Arizona and other states that are all on calls. And I started realizing that like I'm hopping on these Zoom calls and I'm not participating. I'm just sitting in the corner and just listening to the information. And I'm like, this is literally just a podcast. I'm just listening to a podcast. And so prior to COVID, had listened to a ton of podcasts. And then I was on a few different calls and I'd be having a conversation and I'm like, there's 14 other people in this room and it's literally just me and this other guy talking. And the other person's like, does anyone else have any questions? Does anyone else? And they're just like, okay, I'm having this conversation with somebody and like there's 14 people just hanging out listening to it. And so I started reaching out to people and launched a podcast. And, just having those conversations. And I find it to be a platform that sort of lets you virtually grab coffee a little bit and sit down and have a little bit of a guided conversation on topic, and then lets everyone else sort of in on that, sort of like a panel discussion type thing, on their time when they can listen to it.
Perfect.
They get to kind of be a fly on the wall to your conversation whenever they want. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the idea.
Well, and also in these settings, like, one of the episodes that I filmed, the guy literally like was on his iPhone in his car, like, something happened, life happened. And he was like, I still wanted to make the interview, but it was that aspect of like, life happens, like stuff just does and I feel like there's something to be said about content that's just over polished. Because it doesn't feel real. Where sometimes having the whoops, sorry, my cell phone's ringing, like sort of those moments is
or I sneeze.
or sneeze or whatever it is. Like
a real authentic conversation. I completely agree.
And so it just there's a podcast that I've listened to that it's two guys who commute to work. And they literally just start having conversations. And one of the guys one day just hit record on his cell phone and just it's audio only. And so like the other guy's like GPS navigations in the background, like in 2 miles, exit right. But the content's good. So no one cares that Google's giving directions in the background. Like
It's real stuff.
So
It's real stuff.
yeah.
So before we go, Selina, how can folks follow you, find more information about 6 Degrees HR Consulting and all the great work that you're doing?
Yeah. So as you know, I'm the chairwoman of VIA this year, Valley Industry Association, and 10 years celebrated for 6 Degrees. And so I think I mentioned the last time I use kind of Linktree because I do have myself in different platforms and different spaces, and they still all connect and overlap in some way. So on Linktree, I put my website, my VIA website, any events that I'm participating in or sponsoring, and I'm a board member of Wish Education Foundation as well. And so all those things are really important to me. And any given day, you can see me or in multiple things in a day, right? So I put it on Linktree, and they're all there, from the content that we're creating right now to the links to my social media. So Linktree, Selina Thomas. I'm actually have so much content that I have to spend the weekend to just update it, because we've got some things out there that we've recently done that we want to make sure people can rewind. But Linktree is a great tool. I recommend anyone that's doing multiple things, and we're that way because we see each other in different spaces. I would do Linktree. And so Linktree, Selina Thomas, or 6degreeshrconsulting.com is another way. And so that's, for me, the best way to reach me. And then, of course, my social media platforms are all there.
And we will definitely have all of that in the show notes. Selina, Joshua, this is awesome. I'm really grateful to be able to hang out with both of you.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys.
Good to see you, Joshua. Thanks so much. And as always, please follow, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help us in the rankings so that more folks can find out about great businesses, great business leaders, and all of these great resources like the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce, and other organizations that we're a part of and charities that we're a part of. You've been listening to SCV's Voices of Business, a Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce podcast. And you can follow me on Threads and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. I am at Corey S. Nathan. That's at Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, at Corey S. Nathan. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Voices of Business.